And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Tom Vasel.
Hey folks, my name's Tom Vasel, and today we're taking a look at Fort Sumter, the Secession Crisis, 1860 to 1861. A card-driven game about the beginning of the Civil War, or about the events that led up to the Civil War, leading to the bombardment of Fort Sumter, which is the name of the game. Now, when I first got this, I was like, oh, another GMT game. Interesting. I like the Civil War. So I put it aside, and then when I was looking at it more closely, I was like, wait a minute, this is 20 to 40 minutes. Most card-driven games are not 20 to 40 minutes. My favorite card-driven game, Twilight Struggle, 1989. I like the idea of using cards, especially with politics, and so I got very excited about this one. A card-driven game about the political things and military events that led up to the Civil War. That sounds really good. Let's take a look. In this game, players are going to be playing 4 rounds of the game. So 3 rounds and then a final crisis. The 4th round is a little bit different. In the first 3 rounds, players are going to be drawing 2 objectives, one of those of which they're going to pick. All right, so they're going to pick one of these objectives and place it here as a hidden objective that they know about and the other player doesn't. They're also going to be drawing 4 strategy cards, which they'll be using one after the other, 3 of them, the 4th one being saved for the final crisis, which is the 4th round. So you're going to be playing 3 cards in 4 rounds. You'll be playing 12 cards total over the course of the game. On a player's turn, they're going to play a card either for its number, or they can play it as the event on the card, but only if this color matches their side. So this one, all 4 of these cards match the secessionist side, and here we have some cards that match the Union side, and then this card matches either side, so both players can use it. When you place it for your side, you'll do whatever it says. So let's say I'm the secessionist player. It says add up to 2 tokens to the Fort Sumter space, or remove an opposing token from the Fort Sumter space. All right, I'm going to add 2. Now, when I add 2, first you add them from your token pool. I don't have any in my token pool, so I start pulling them off the track here, and I put them here in, where's Fort Sumter? Fort Sumter right there. And as the game goes by, you'll pull them off one at a time in a row like this. As soon as you break this escalation at the end of that round, these 2 cubes will come into your thing. So when each player breaks into this escalation, breaches that, they're going to get those cubes. In tension, the first player to breach that is going to get 3 cubes, but the other player gets the Peace Commissioner. The Peace Commissioner can be placed on the board, which essentially stops cubes being added to or released from that. And the first person to go into the final crisis here, breach that, will get 4 cubes, but they also lose a victory point, and the second person gets only 2 cubes instead of all 4. So there's some give and take as this track comes into play. So players are going to be playing these cards. If you can play them for the event, so here Jefferson Davis, add 3 tokens to political spaces. There are 3 of spaces of each type. There's armament, political spaces, and each of these spaces has one specific spot that's in that area. This is all 3 of these together are considered to be the crisis dimension. All right, so there's like a crisis dimension, and one of the spots in it is called the pivotal space of that spot. So there's the armaments crisis dimension, then these 3 armament spaces, and then this is the armament pivotal space. And that matters because you're trying to control them. When you play the card for the number, you can just take cubes off and put them in pretty much any space you want. But usually the event is better, but it's going to be specific and tell you where to go. Now, what you're trying to do is you're trying to control all 3 spots in each of the crisis dimensions. If you do that, at the end of each of the rounds, you will score a point for each one that you control all 3 regions of the crisis dimension. Now, whoever controls the pivotal spot, though, has the opportunity, if you control it, to move or remove 2 tokens from those spots. So controlling this one, you could kick people maybe out of the other ones, and then you can control the whole thing, thus getting a victory point. Also, at the end of a round, you reveal the hidden objectives, and whoever controls Fort Sumter, either side, will get a victory point. So you could get your objective and your opponent's objective. And then if you're the person who played the card and you control the Fort Sumter space, I can also remove 3 tokens from armament spaces or remove up to 1 token from any space. So the maximum number of points I guess you could get on a turn would be 4 plus both cards, so 6, but that seems crazy. I mean, I would assume your opponent's doing nothing at that point in time. So that's how the first 3 rounds go. In the 4th round, you will have those 3 cards you set aside for the final crisis. At that point, nothing else in the cards matter, only the bottoms of the cards do. The bottoms are going to say secession, armaments, or public opinion. Political is not on the bottom of any of the cards. You're going to put these in any order you want, and then you will reveal them at the same time as your opponent. So if they both match, then both players have to remove a cube from a space that matches that. So if I play secession and my opponent plays secession, we both have to remove a cube from the secession area, or 2 cubes from any area. If they don't match, then each player, starting with the first player, can move 2 tokens from any space in the map or from their token pool into 1 or 2 spaces that match this color. And there's a latch stitch thing. And then at the end of the game, you will do the same thing. If you control every space of a crisis dimension, you'll get a victory point. You get 1 victory point for controlling Fort Sumter, because that's where the war began. And you score a victory point if you have 3 or more tokens than your opponent does in your token pool. Whoever has the most points, by the way, points are kept track of over here, is the winner of the game. The cards for the game are very decent. I mean, they're decent cards. They're your typical GMT cards. They have some historical pictures, and they're pretty obvious what they do. It's pretty easy to tell which cards are which. All the cubes and all the pieces are nice. I actually got an extra cube, an extra scoring token, an extra piece commissioner, an extra round marker. So there's extra pieces in the box. And I mean, it's not that exciting, all the pieces. What I do want to point out is the rule book here, which is really not that long at all. It's only 8 pages of rules. There is a playbook which gives a detailed illustration of play. However, I will argue that I did not like the detailed thing of how to play as much, because there were a couple things that you could do, like if you control one of these, I want to see how that works, and they were like, this player decides not to do it. Well, that might make sense strategically, but if you're going to show me how to play, I would have preferred they did a few of these things. There was a lot of times where they were like, they just don't do anything. And then here's the final round, do the cards match and stuff like that. And then there's a whole lot of history, explaining every card in the game and why it's in the game, designers' notes and strategy tips, where they talk about basic strategy and final crisis tactics, etc. This is a nice thing to have, and I have read it thoroughly, actually, to learn more about the game. It's a good GMT production. I will say, I think the board itself is super boring. These round circles and squares, that doesn't look interesting at all. That map literally doesn't even need to exist. Like Fort Sumter could be over here for all I would know. There's like no movement on the board or no connection. You're just literally putting pieces in spots around the board. I don't know. It just feels a bit abstracted on how the board is laid out. Interestingly enough, when people design games and I play them, one of the things that I'm often telling designers, or in my reviews, I'll say, why didn't someone streamline this game? Why didn't they just make the game faster, simpler, streamline, cut the rough edges off? Occasionally, I'm going to say what I say now, and it's possible to just way too much streamline a game. Now, we played this game live, and we made a few minor rules mistakes the first time we played it, and I've gone over those since. And some people said, you really got to get into history. You got to read the book. You're right. And that's one of my problems with this game, is that the game itself brings no historical bearing at all. I felt no history. There's just pictures on the cards. What the cards did not feel historical at all. If you read that book, sure, it teaches you about the secessionist crisis that happens. It teaches you a little bit about the events that lead up to the Civil War, but nothing in the game does that, and even more to the point, made me care. Yes, in Twilight Struggle and other games like this, I play them and be like, whoa, that card does that. Why does that card do that? I'll go look. Here, the cards just simply added cubes to the board. You are literally playing 12 cards over the course of this game, and it's pretty much straightforward. I have this objective card. I should try to control that. It's worth a point. I want to control these regions. Ooh, then we go down to deep strategy. Maybe I should control the political region, since then that's not going to be changed by the final crisis. Sure, I get that. There's a little bit of strategy in the game, and he spends pages. I mean, there's more pages on the strategy than there's not, and it almost feels like a treatise on, please accept the fact that there's strategy in this game, even though it doesn't look there. He even writes a whole paragraph about that final crisis stuff. Looks like it's random, but it's not. I'm going to beg to differ on that. It's pretty random. It's like rock, paper, scissors. You're like, well, if you know there's like half the cards in a deck, armaments cards, the other ones, it's still random, and it just isn't interesting. Ooh, we flipped over 2 cards. That doesn't feel historic at all. And he wrote some historical reason, and people went into it, and events were already set in motion, and blah, blah, blah. But here's the deal. As much as I like history, it also has to be a good game. And I just don't find it that much interesting. There's a few points. There's if you put too many cubes out on the board quickly, you might be the first one to breach the final crisis, and therefore lose a victory point that way. Okay, so that's kind of interesting. Pulling the tokens off that track and putting them on the board, then having them put back into a token pool, which you put back in the board. That wasn't interesting at all. And this whole game as a whole just feels really boring. I get accused often of not liking games. Tom doesn't like games of that complexity. I really do like a lot of games that are complex and interesting. And even if it, there's some, I make fun of like games like this because they'll be like, in this round you can only, this artillery can only shoot this because there was a rain cloud or whatever. And I'll be like, oh, I can't believe this game had a rule about that one event. But this has gotten rid of all of that to the point where if you took off the word Fort Sumter and the pictures, I would not know we were playing a Civil War game at all. And it's short and fast. I just didn't really find it to be fun. I really wanted to like this one because I like card-driven games. But this one just, like I said, it just sterile is the word that comes to mind, and I didn't really find it fun. Dice Tower Judgment, streamlined into boringness.